homeless twins, asked the millionaire CEO to have lunch with them, and he couldn't say no. Before we begin, we'd love to know, what country are you watching from? Leave it in the comments. And at the end, don't forget to give this story a rating from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The Little Girl Outside Table 9. David Mitchell was halfway through his untouched dinner when he noticed her, a little girl, no more than 6, standing outside in the snow. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She was just watching. Thin sweater, red fingers, wet shoes. Her breath fogged the glass between them. He blinked, thinking maybe she was lost, but then she smiled and mouthed something through the window. The waitress leaned in, almost whispering. She waits for her mom every night, works in the kitchen. Sometimes, when people are kind, she eats dinner with them. And just as David turned to look again, the door opened and the girl stepped inside. She looked straight at him, eyes like pale amber, then asked softly, "Would you like to have dinner with us?" He didn't know it yet, but that question would save his life. The Little Girl Outside Table 9. The first snow always made Chicago quieter. It dulled the noise of the streets, softened the neon lights, and made the whole world feel like it was holding its breath. David Mitchell sat at table 9 of the Fairview Grill, as he had every Thursday night for the past year alone. Always alone with a dinner he never finished and a glass of wine he never touched. He used to come here with her. Her laugh used to echo off the windows. Her scarf always fell into the soup. Her cheeks would flush when he said her name like it still meant something. But now, he just stared out the window. The waitress, Lena, didn't ask questions anymore. She brought his steak rare, replaced the wine when it sat too long, and never asked if someone was joining him. That question had died the night Rachel did. He was only 42, but loss had a way of aging a man faster than time. And tonight, through the snow-dusted window, he saw her, a little girl. No coat, just a too-thin sweater and leggings with a hole in the knee. Her sneakers were soaked. Her hands were tucked under her arms, her breath visible in tiny white clouds. She wasn't crying. She wasn't moving. She was watching. She stood just outside the glass, facing him like she knew him, like she'd been waiting for him. At first, he thought maybe she was lost or waiting for someone, but no one came. And when their eyes met her small, serious face tilted to the side, curious, David felt something strange flutter in his chest. Not pity, not alarm, recognition. He waved for Lena. "Who is she?" he asked quietly. His voice rusted from disuse. Lena peeked through the window. "That's Emma. Her mom works dish shifts here. Single mom. Kid waits out there most nights until she finishes. Usually keeps to herself." David frowned. "Why not let her wait inside?" "She doesn't ask," Lena said gently. "And pride's a funny thing when you've got nothing." He turned back to the window. Emma was still there, still watching. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not a wide grin, just a soft curl at the corners of her mouth. Then she raised a hand and pointed, not at the building, not at the kitchen where her mother was, but at him. The door opened, the cold swept in, and Emma stepped inside, hesitantly, like she was trespassing in someone else's story. She walked straight to his table, stood quietly beside his chair, then said, in a voice that trembled more from shyness than cold, "Would you like to have dinner with us?" David blinked. He looked around confused. "Us." Emma nodded, serious. "You look lonely. My mama says, sometimes dinner tastes better when there's someone to talk to." David didn't know what to say. His chest hurt, but not in the usual way. It wasn't the tightness he felt every night before bed. It wasn't the heaviness that wrapped around his lungs whenever he saw a father walking his daughter home. This was different. A little girl, half frozen, standing beside his table, asking him to join her for a meal he didn't deserve. He cleared his throat. "What's your name?" "Emma," she said. "I'm 6.5, but I'm tall for my age. My mama says so." "Where is she now?" Emma pointed toward the kitchen. "She washes dishes. At night, I wait for her so we can walk home together." David looked toward the kitchen, then back at the child. "Do you eat?" "Sometimes," she shrugged, but her eyes betrayed more truth than her words ever could. He nodded slowly. "Sit," he said gently. "We'll start with hot chocolate." Emma's eyes lit up like someone had turned the lights on inside her. And as Lena placed the order and brought her a mug nearly as big as her face, David watched the steam curl upward and thought, "This is the first warm thing in my life in a very long time." What happens when the person you save ends up saving you back? Chapter 1. The Girl in the Snow. It took Emma exactly 3 sips to start trusting him. She held the oversized mug with both hands, her fingers barely peeking above the ceramic. The whipped cream left a white mustache on her upper lip, but she didn't wipe it off. Just looked up at David with wide, curious eyes. "You don't smile much," she said softly. David blinked. "No, I guess I don't." "You should. You look better when you smile." It was such a strange thing to hear from a child who'd just been sitting in the snow, alone, outside a restaurant that served $60 steaks. But there was no malice in her voice, just observation. Like she'd said, the sky was blue, or the table was brown. "I don't have much to smile about," he said, almost to himself. Emma tilted her head. "Why not? You're warm. You have food. Your coat looks expensive." He raised an eyebrow. "You think expensive coats make people happy?" She shrugged. "Mama says, happy and rich don't live in the same house." David couldn't help it. He let out a short laugh, quiet, startled. She looked pleased. "See, told you." Lena brought over a second cup of cocoa and set it down gently in front of David. He hadn't asked for one, but Emma beamed like she had orchestrated the whole thing. "Now it's dinner," she said. 2 people, 2 cups. He stared at the little girl across the table from him, legs swinging from the booth, her sweater sleeves pushed over her hands like tiny mittens. Everything about her was small. Her voice, her frame, her presence, and yet somehow she was here, not afraid, not begging, just offering company. "Where's your dad?" he asked gently. Emma went still for a moment, then looked down at her mug. "He died when I was 4. Heart stopped in the kitchen. I was coloring on the fridge when the ambulance came." The words were soft, rehearsed like she'd said them enough times to dull their sting. David swallowed. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," she said. "Mama still cries sometimes, but we're okay. I take care of her. You take care of her." Emma nodded. "She works hard, so I do the easy stuff. I tell her jokes. I hide notes in her lunch. I keep her warm when the heater doesn't work." He felt something clench in his chest. He had built skyscrapers. He had funded research labs and donated libraries. He had a house on Lake Michigan that sat empty most weekends. But this little girl in her threadbare leggings and snow-soaked shoes had more purpose in her 6-year-old soul than he'd had in his entire life. "Emma." He hesitated. "Would you like something to eat?" Her eyes flickered. Not with greed, not even hunger, just caution. "I don't want to get my mama in trouble." "You won't," he said gently. "We'll just share nothing fancy. Some fries, maybe soup." Emma considered this. "Okay," she said, "but I have to save half for Mama. She loves French fries." David signaled to Lena, who already understood. A bowl of hot tomato soup, a side of fries. Nothing extravagant, just enough to feel human again. While they waited, Emma pulled a notebook from her tiny backpack. The edges were bent. The paper was wrinkled, but her face lit up like she was unveiling treasure. "I draw stories," she said, flipping to a page. "This one's about a girl who finds a house in the snow. It looks empty, but it has a fireplace and cocoa, and the man inside is lonely, but he doesn't know it yet. David stared at the page. The lines were crooked, drawn with a child's hand, but the house looked a lot like his own. And the man? Well, it didn't take much to see the resemblance. He looked up at her, heart thudding softly. "Emma, why did you come to my table?" She blinked. "Because you looked like you needed someone to." He said nothing, not because he didn't have words, but because her answer was already everything. The food arrived. Emma ate slowly, carefully, as if trying to make the warmth last longer. She saved exactly half the fries and wrapped them in a napkin for her mother. She offered David her last bite of soup, and when he politely declined, she nodded like she respected the decision. "Mama's gonna be off in 10 minutes, she said, glancing toward the kitchen. "She doesn't like me talking to strangers." David nodded. "She's right to be careful, but you're not a stranger anymore," Emma said. "You're Mr. David. That counts." He smiled, truly smiled this time, and it caught even him by surprise. Pause point. He hadn't been called by his first name like that, soft, trusting, almost kind, in longer than he could remember. Sarah Carter emerged from the kitchen 10 minutes later, drying her hands on her apron. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. But when she saw her daughter sitting at table 9 warm, fed, and chatting with a man in a suit, her expression changed fast. She rushed forward. "Emma." Emma slid out of the booth. "Hi, Mama. This is Mr. David. He shared his soup with me." David stood. "Ma'am, Sarah's voice was sharp. "Don't ma'am me. Who are you? Why are you talking to my daughter?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was scared, fiercely protective. The kind of fear born from a world that hadn't been kind to her. David raised both hands. "I didn't mean any harm." She was outside. She looked cold. Sarah looked at Emma, then at the half-empty plate, the hot chocolate mug. "You fed her?" "Yes." Emma tugged her mother's sleeve. "It's okay, Mama. He was nice. He let me draw." Sarah's eyes locked with his. Something between apology and warning passed between them. "Next time," she said tightly, "ask me first." David nodded. "Of course." She scooped Emma into her arms. The girl protested, half playful, half embarrassed. But Sarah didn't let go. "Thank you," she said barely. And then they were gone. Just like that, back out into the snow. But the table didn't feel empty this time. Not quite. He had fed a little girl 1 bowl of soup, but somehow she had left him full. Chapter 2. Her name is Emma. Sarah Carter didn't sleep well that night. Emma was curled beside her on their small pull-out sofa, warm, under 3 mismatched blankets. Her arm flung over Sarah's chest like she was holding the whole world in place. But Sarah lay wide awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling, heart pounding with a fear she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't just that Emma had spoken to a stranger. It was that she'd smiled at him. "I told you not to talk to people you don't know, Ing," she'd whispered after they stepped out into the snow. Emma had looked up at her with confusion and a little hurt, but he was kind. "Mama." He shared his soup. He listened to my story. Sarah had crouched down in the snow, grabbing her daughter's mittened hands. "Kind people can still hurt you. Baby, kind people, leave." Emma hadn't responded. She'd just walked a little slower on the way home, and that more than anything had broken Sarah's heart. Back in their apartment, the radiator hissed and groaned, working overtime against the Chicago cold. Their fridge held half a loaf of bread, 2 eggs, and the fries Emma had wrapped carefully in napkins. "I saved them for you," Emma had whispered before bed. Sarah had eaten every last one, not because she was hungry, but because love, even when it comes wrapped in grease and cold napkins, should never go to waste. In the quiet of the early morning, Sarah slipped out from under the covers and tiptoed to the kitchen nook. She opened the cabinet under the sink and pulled out a worn folder, thick with papers, creased at the edges. Inside, a faded acceptance letter to Northwestern Medical School, her husband, Noah's death certificate, Emma's birth certificate, emergency contacts, vaccination records, a rejection letter from the state for housing assistance, and at the bottom, tucked in the back, a photograph, Noah holding baby Emma, both of them bathed in late summer sunlight on the porch of a house that no longer existed. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them away. Crying didn't fix leaks, didn't pay bills, didn't keep your daughter out of the snow. Later that morning, as she brushed Emma's hair before school, her daughter suddenly asked, "Why don't you trust Mr. David?" Sarah's hand paused. "Because the world doesn't give without asking something back." Emma wrinkled her nose, but he didn't ask for anything. Not yet. Emma was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "He has sad eyes." Sarah didn't respond. She remembered those eyes, gray, still, like someone had closed all the curtains in his soul and forgotten where they left the key. She'd seen that look before. In the mirror, David Mitchell woke in his penthouse, with Emma's voice still echoing in his head. "You look lonely. You should smile more." He made coffee, but it tasted like cardboard. The silence in his house was louder than ever. For the first time in months, he didn't go to the office. He sat on his leather couch, the one Rachel had picked out, and stared at the sketch Emma had left behind, forgotten in the booth. A crooked little house, a fireplace, a man sitting inside, holding a cup of cocoa, alone. Back on the south side, Sarah left Emma with the neighbor upstairs, Miss Dolores, then hurried to catch the bus to her morning shift at the nursing home. She was 5 minutes late. Again, her supervisor rolled her eyes, but didn't say anything. Sarah changed sheets, refilled water jugs, wiped down windowsills, all while the echo of her daughter's words stayed lodged in her heart like a splinter. "He has sad eyes." She didn't want to feel sorry for a man in a designer coat, dining alone in a restaurant where she could never afford a meal. She didn't want to imagine that maybe, underneath his money and his silence, he was just a man who had lost something too. She didn't want to imagine him at all, but she did, all day. That night, when she arrived at the Fairview Grill for her evening shift, Lena caught her near the back sink. "Hey," the waitress said gently. "The guy from last night, he left this, said to give it to you." It was a plain, white envelope with no name. Inside, a handwritten note. No signature, no pretense, just 3 lines. "She reminds me of someone I lost. Thank you for sharing her light with me. No strings, just kindness." Sarah stared at it. She should have been angry, or skeptical, or scared. But all she felt was seen. No one had thanked her for Emma before. Not once. Not for the drawings she left on napkins. Not for the song she made up in the bath. Not for the way she brought color to every room she walked into. People saw a single mother with tired eyes and a dirty apron. No one saw Emma except him. Later that night, Emma crawled into bed beside her, clutching the sketch pad she always carried. "Did he write back?" she asked, sleepily. Sarah blinked. "What?" "The man from dinner. Mr. David. You looked like you got a letter." Sarah smiled into the dark. He said, "Thank you." Emma beamed. "Told you he was nice." Sarah held her daughter close and listened to her breath slow. And for the first time in a long, long time, she wondered what it might feel like to say yes. Sometimes, the first step to healing isn't hope. It's being seen. Chapter 3, I Don't Need Your Pity. David came back 3 nights later. Same time, same table, same quiet order. But this time, when he walked in, his eyes searched for something, or rather, someone. He tried not to be obvious, tried not to crane his neck toward the kitchen, but every time the door swung open and it wasn't her, his chest tugged in that strange, unfamiliar way again. He told himself it was nothing. He was a creature of habit. That's all. But when Emma appeared, bundled this time, her cheeks flushed from the walk and her sketch pad clutched under one arm. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. She saw him immediately. Her face lit up, not just with recognition but with delight. She ran to his table without hesitation. "You came back." He smiled. "I was hoping you would, too." Emma slid into the booth across from him, already flipping to a new page in her notebook. "I drew you a better house this time. The chimney has real smoke now." He leaned over the table, pretending to examine the drawing with the seriousness of a museum curator. "Excellent improvement. I love the wreath on the door. I thought it made it more Christmassy." A pause, then softly, "My daddy used to hang one, even when we didn't have a tree." David's throat tightened. He nodded. "I bet he was a good man. The best." Before he could ask more, the kitchen door swung open, and this time, it was her. Sarah. Same apron, same guarded eyes. But tonight, her posture was different, tighter. She saw Emma in the booth with him and moved fast, crossing the restaurant like someone walking through fire. "Emma," she said, breath catching slightly. "What did we talk about?" Emma froze, mid-doodle. "But Mama, he invited me, and he brought crayons this time." David stood. "Ms. Carter Sarah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overstep." She turned to him, jaw tense. "I told you the other night. My daughter isn't a charity case." "I know. Then why keep showing up?" Her voice wasn't cruel, just tired, protective. "You think because you wear a $1,000 coat and write notes that say, 'Thank you,' I'm supposed to trust you?" David didn't flinch. "No, I don't expect anything. I just what?" He hesitated. How could he say it out loud? That since the night her daughter sat at his table, the silence in his house had felt heavier. That the cocoa stain on his sleeve made him feel anchored. That this tiny girl who wore mismatched socks and drew crooked houses had somehow cracked a door he thought was long sealed shut. "I liked her company," he said simply. Sarah stared at him, like she didn't quite believe it. Like no one ever just liked something about them without an agenda. "She's a child," she said flatly. "She's extraordinary." That made her blink. Emma looked between them, wide-eyed. "Mama, he's not bad." David smiled at the phrasing. "I'm not trying to be anything," he said, quieter now. "I just saw her, that's all." Sarah's jaw shifted. "You saw her," she echoed. Voice sharp. "Yes." She let out a bitter laugh, low and hollow. "You don't know what it's like," she whispered, leaning in just enough that Emma couldn't hear. "To walk into rooms and be invisible. To ask for help and be told you're too proud. To accept help and be told you're too weak. I didn't offer help." She shot him a look. "Then what are you offering?" "Mr. Mitchell." And now he was the one who hesitated, because the truth was he didn't know. He hadn't planned any of this. He didn't expect to feel seen by a child or challenged by a woman who spoke like survival was something you had to earn. He just knew he wanted to see them again. He reached into his coat and slid something across the table. A book, worn but clean, the spine lovingly taped. Emma's eyes lit up. "The Secret Garden." David smiled. "It was Rachel's favorite growing up." Sarah froze. "Rachel, my wife," he said softly. "She passed 4 years ago. We never had children." A pause. "I don't come here to save anyone, Sarah," he added. "I come here because this is the one place I can remember who I used to be." And for the first time in a long time, someone sat across from me and made it feel like maybe there's still something left. Sarah looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, her guard dropped just a crack. "Emma," she said gently, not looking away from him. Go give this to Lena and ask for 2 soups. One for you, one for me." Emma slid off the bench, practically skipping. Sarah took his seat across the table, but her hands remained in her lap. "Just so we're clear," she said softly, "I don't need saving. Not from you. Not from anyone." David nodded. "I know. But Emma," her voice caught, "she deserves moments of joy. If that's all this is, I won't stop you." David didn't speak. He simply nodded. And when Emma returned, balancing 2 bowls and asking if they could pretend it's a picnic, Sarah smiled. Not wide, not soft, but it was a start. Pride isn't the absence of need. It's the belief that no one sees your worth beyond it. Chapter 4. Snow days and warmth. The snow fell heavier than anyone expected that weekend. By Sunday morning, the city was blanketed in white. The kind of snow that turned sidewalks into silence and made the world feel like it had been freshly painted. David watched it from his bedroom window, coffee cooling in his hand. Below him, the garden was untouched. Not a single footprint on the stone paths. The old maple tree stood draped in white lace, its bare limbs cradling the snowfall. Rachel used to love mornings like this. She'd pull him outside just to feel the snow crunch beneath her boots. Now, the silence stretched like an old sweater worn. Familiar, a little too heavy in the sleeves. He was about to turn away when a thought tugged at him, or rather, a memory. A little girl, her pink shoes soaked, her drawing of a house with a wreath and a fireplace. Emma, Sarah, answered the call on the 3rd ring. Her voice guarded. "Miss Carter," David said. "I know this is unusual, but I was wondering if Emma's ever built a snowman before." There was a pause on the other end. "Then why?" "Because I have more snow than I know what to do with, and a treehouse that's never been used." Silence. "Then you have a treehouse, a very good one," he said softly, "but no one to climb it." He expected a no or a lecture, but instead, Sarah exhaled like someone releasing tension from her shoulders. "We'll be there in an hour." Emma nearly cried when she saw the house. "It's a castle," she whispered, nose pressed to the window of the hired car. "A real one." Sarah looked too quietly stunned. The Mitchell estate wasn't flashy. It was historic. 4 stories of quiet beauty. Black shutters, frosted windows, smoke curling from the chimney like a story waiting to be told. David opened the door himself. Emma ran past him into the foyer, her boots tracking snow onto the marble. Sarah hesitated. Her eyes took everything in the grand staircase, the chandelier, the faint scent of cedar, and something older money. "I told you, we didn't need charity," she said. David didn't flinch. "This isn't charity. What is it?" Then he looked at her earnestly. "Loneliness, meeting loneliness. That's all." The first snowball hit him behind the ear. "Emma," Sarah gasped, horrified. "Apologize." But David was already laughing. "She has good aim," he said, wiping snow from his collar. "You should consider enrolling her in sports." Emma grinned wickedly, already forming the next one. And just like that, the garden came alive. Snow angels, crooked snowmen, a lopsided fort that collapsed twice and was rebuilt with stubborn joy. David didn't remember the last time he laughed so hard his stomach hurt, or the last time he heard a child call his name like it belonged to something safe. When they finally came in soaked, red-cheeked, breathless, Emma squealed at the sight of hot chocolate lined up in thick ceramic mugs on the kitchen island. Sarah pulled off her gloves slowly, watching him. "This place is too much," she murmured. David handed her a towel. "So is grief," he said, "and yet we live with it." She met his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look away. The treehouse was more than just wood. It had been Rachel's idea back when they still believed in future children. She had drawn it on napkins, collected inspiration from Pinterest, even picked out the weatherproof cushions herself. David had built it anyway, after she died, a way to hold on to the idea of laughter that never came. But today, there was laughter. Emma stood at the top, waving like a queen from her castle. Her boots kicked snow off the edge as she shouted, "Mama, look, it has a telescope." Sarah climbed the ladder after her, hesitating at the top. She stepped inside. The cushions were still pristine, the shelves still bare, and there, on the far wall painted in faded lavender, were the words Rachel had chosen. "Every heart deserves a place to be young." Sarah ran her fingers over the letters. "She sounds like she was wonderful," she said softly. David stood at the ladder below. "She was..." They were quiet a long moment. Then Sarah spoke again. "Why didn't you ever have kids?" His answer came like a stone skipping across still water. "Work, timing, maybe fear." Sarah nodded slowly. "I was going to be a doctor," she said. "Northwestern, full ride, then life changed." "Emma," she nodded. "I don't regret her, not even a little, but I do regret thinking I had more time." That's the lie we all believe, isn't it? David looked up at her. "No," he said. "The lie is thinking we don't get second chances." That night, they sat in front of the fireplace. Emma fell asleep first, curled up with one of Rachel's throw blankets, her sketch pad still open to a new drawing. A snowman, a treehouse, and 3 stick figures holding hands. David brought out a small photo album, offered it gently. "She should know who built this world she's playing in." Sarah flipped through the pages. Rachel smiling, Rachel planting tulips, Rachel barefoot on the dock. She would have loved Emma, David said. Sarah didn't speak, but her hand rested lightly on the page a moment longer than necessary. As they prepared to leave, Emma clung to his coat. "Can we come back?" David knelt down, smoothing her hair. "Anytime, even on boring days, especially on boring days." Outside, snow began to fall again, lighter now, softer. Sarah turned to him before they stepped into the cab. "I don't trust easy," she said. "I don't love easy," he replied. They stood quietly in the porch light, snow gathering on their shoulders. "But I'm learning," she added. David smiled. "So am I. Sometimes warmth doesn't come from fire. It comes from someone letting you in out of the cold." Chapter 5. What if we don't deserve this? David stood in the hallway outside the guest room, holding a tiny pair of pink mittens in his hands. Emma had left them on the windowsill after their 3rd visit. He should have returned them the next day, but he hadn't. Instead, he placed them on the mantel like they belonged there. Like she did. Like they did. Sarah hadn't said much during that last visit. She'd accepted the cocoa, helped Emma build another snowman, watched David from a distance with that same careful mix of suspicion and softness. But he saw the way she lingered in the garden afterward, the way her fingers brushed the ivy on the back gate like she was trying to memorize it, like she didn't trust the moment to last. He didn't blame her. He didn't trust it either. That night, Sarah sat at the tiny kitchen table in their apartment, flipping through a copy of The Secret Garden that David had given Emma. He'd written something on the inside cover. "To Emma May, you always believe in locked doors and the magic of finding the key. Simple, thoughtful, dangerous." She knew what this looked like. A man with wealth, time, and a hole in his chest, reaching for someone who made him feel useful again. She'd read that story before, and it never ended well for girls like her. The next day, she told him they needed space. "David, this is starting to feel like more than friendship, and I can't afford to confuse Emma or myself." He didn't argue. He simply nodded. "Okay," but something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of understanding, or maybe resignation. "Do you think," he asked quietly, "that maybe you deserve this?" She laughed, bitter and sudden. I'm a single mother, living in a one-bedroom apartment with a daughter I can barely feed. Deserve isn't a word that fits me. David didn't blink. I lost my wife while she was still smiling, he said. I buried her before I said goodbye. I spent 4 years collecting houses and board seats and donations with my name on the wall, and not one person who actually knew me. He leaned in. So maybe I don't deserve this either. But here we are. They sat in silence for a long time. Emma, blissfully unaware, was outside in the treehouse drawing a picture of their snowman now patched with buttons David had dug out of an old coat drawer. Finally, Sarah spoke. I used to dream big, she said. I had plans. Middle school, pediatrics. I wanted to open a clinic for kids in neighborhoods like mine. What happened? My husband got sick. Cancer, stage E4 lymphoma. He was gone before Emma turned 3. David closed his eyes. It's always too fast. Sarah nodded. After that, dreams didn't matter anymore. I worked, I parented, I stopped letting myself want anything that could disappear. David stood slowly and walked toward the bookshelf in the living room. He pulled down a thick folder and handed it to her. Inside was a blueprint, the floor plan for a children's wellness center, fully funded, fully staffed, ready to break ground in South Chicago. Her name was on the first page. She blinked. What is this? A start? He said. She stared at the pages. You did this. Why? Because you never stopped being a doctor. You just needed someone to believe you still were. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she shook her head. You can't fix me with blueprints and promises. I'm not trying to fix you. Then what are you doing? David. He stepped closer. I'm trying to make sure that the best parts of you don't go to waste. That night, Sarah tucked Emma into bed in one of the guest rooms at David's house. They weren't supposed to stay, but the storm outside had turned heavy. The roads, a white blur. David offered the room. Sarah didn't argue. Emma curled under the duvet, hugging her stuffed rabbit close. Mama. Yes. Baby. Do you think Mr. David is lonely when we're not here? Sarah smiled faintly. Maybe. I like it here. It's warm. And he laughs at my jokes, even the bad ones. Sarah sat beside her on the bed. I like it too, she whispered, downstairs. David sat alone by the fireplace, staring at the flames. In his lap, an unopened letter from his oncologist. He didn't need to read it to know the fatigue, the tremors, the pain in his bones when he climbed the stairs. But for the first time in months, he didn't feel afraid of the end. He just felt afraid of not finishing what he'd started, of leaving 2 girls behind who didn't need saving, but had saved him. The next morning, Emma barreled down the stairs, breathless and excited. It snowed again. Mama says we can build a snow dragon today. David smiled. A snow dragon. That's advanced level. Emma grinned. You'll help. Right. Of course. Sarah appeared in the hallway, dressed in one of Rachel's old sweaters, the one with the fraying sleeves. She met his gaze. No defenses. No bravado. Just tired eyes and a fragile truth. I'm scared, she said quietly. So am I. What if we don't deserve this? David stepped closer. What if that's never what love was about? We think love is earned, but sometimes it's simply offered, quietly, completely, without explanation. Chapter 6, Dinner for 3. The first snowflake of Christmas Eve landed on Emma's mitten like a tiny miracle. She held it up to her mother with breathless wonder. Look, Mama! It stayed. Sarah smiled, gently brushing it away before it melted. They were walking up the steps of David Mitchell's estate again. This time, they'd been invited, not by accident, not out of charity, but because Emma had asked, with all the boldness of a child who doesn't yet believe love can be temporary. Mr. David, will you have Christmas dinner with us? and he had smiled slow and warm and answered without hesitation, "Only if you promise to help me burn the ham." Inside, the house felt different. There was music playing, not loud, just soft piano in the background. The dining table, usually bare and untouched, had candles, cloth napkins, 3 place settings, not 2, 3. David was in the kitchen, struggling with a roasting pan and cursing under his breath, with a familiarity that made Sarah smile. "You cook?" she asked, stepping in to help. "Is that disbelief I hear?" "Just gentle skepticism." He laughed. "Let's say I attempt it. Emma's the real chef." As if on cue, Emma appeared in the doorway, wearing an apron that swallowed her whole. "Emergency," she called out. "The mashed potatoes are too mashed." David put a hand to his chest. "Not the mashed potatoes." Emma giggled. "They look like lava." Sarah moved to the counter, peering into the bowl. "Looks like love to me." They all laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt good. Easy, real. Dinner was a little burnt. The rolls were slightly hard. The cranberry sauce came from a can, but no one cared. They ate by candlelight. Emma told stories. Sarah listened. David poured sparkling cider and toasted with Emma like they were sealing a treaty between 2 kingdoms. And somewhere between the second helping of stuffing and the lava potatoes, David looked up and realized he wasn't lonely. Not tonight. After dinner, Emma pulled a crumpled envelope from her coat pocket. "I made you something," she told David. Inside was a drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one medium, one small. Above them, in careful block letters, it said, U.S. David felt something in his chest. Twist. Something he hadn't felt in years. Not grief, not ache, but longing, the kind you don't run from, the kind that roots you. Later, as snow whispered against the windows, Sarah joined him in the living room, while Emma played with puzzle pieces on the rug. They sat in silence for a while. The tree lights flickered. The fire crackled. David's hand rested on the armrest beside hers. Not touching, but close, very close. "She called it us," he said quietly. Sarah looked at him, eyes tired but soft. "She wants to believe in something permanent. So do I." They sat in the quiet for another long moment. Then Sarah spoke. "I haven't had a real Christmas since Noah died." David looked over at her. "I haven't had a real anything since Rachel." She nodded, and then, not for pity, not for comfort, but for something that felt like peace, she let her head rest gently against his shoulder. Upstairs, Emma fell asleep, wrapped in a quilt she'd claimed as the warmest blanket in the galaxy. Downstairs, David whispered, "Stay tonight. Both of you." Sarah lifted her head slowly. "Are you sure?" He looked at her, voice thick with the weight of finally asking for what he needed. "I've never been more sure of anything." That night, David didn't lie awake replaying regrets. Sarah didn't listen for sounds of leaking pipes or distant arguments from the apartment next door. And Emma didn't dream about hunger or cold or the feeling of being forgotten. They were warm, together, quiet, a dinner, a fire, and the simplest, most unexpected miracle of all, belonging. Sometimes the heart doesn't break from absence. It breaks from forgetting what it feels like to be wanted. Chapter 7. The offer. David didn't know what scared him more. The fact that they were still coming back, or the fact that his house didn't feel like his anymore when they weren't in it. Since Christmas Eve, Sarah and Emma had returned 3 times. Each visit longer, softer, warmer. They'd built snow forts, watched old movies, and baked cookies that Emma insisted on calling family circles. "Because that's what we are now," she explained, pointing at the lumpy dough. "One circle, even if it's a little messy." That morning, David sat in his study, staring at 2 signed documents One was for Emma's future, a scholarship trust with her name already engraved on the folder. The other was for Sarah, a full-time job offer at a children's wellness center. Her dream, finally funded. Both offers were real, earned, meant with care, and yet his hands shook because what he was about to do wasn't a business move. It wasn't a gift. It was a door, and he didn't know if she'd walk through it or slam it shut. When Sarah arrived later that afternoon, snow still in her hair, and Emma trailing behind her with a bag of markers, David led her into the study. The fireplace was already lit. He waited until Emma was upstairs, humming from the guest room. Then he handed her the envelope. Sarah took it slowly, brows furrowed. What is this? A job offer. She didn't open it. David, it's real, he said quickly. The clinic is scheduled to open in March. Full staff, real salary, benefits. The title says Program Director. Because that's what you are. She stared at him, like he'd spoken in a language she didn't know. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? Because you deserve to build something that's yours, he said. Because you never stopped being the woman who wanted to heal people. And because Emma deserves to see her mother wake up every morning with purpose, not exhaustion. Her hands tightened around the paper. You can't just fix my life with a job. I'm not trying to fix it, David said softly. I'm trying to give it room to grow. She stared at him, blinking quickly. This is too much. No, he said, stepping closer. Too much is what you've had to carry for too long. Silence. Then, barely above a whisper, I don't know how to do this. He paused. Do what? Accept things. Trust people. Believe that good things don't come with a price. David's voice dropped. There's no price. There's always a price. He stepped back, took a breath. Then take the job? Not for me. Not for us. Just for you. She looked at him like she was trying to see past all the ways she'd learned to protect herself. And what if I fail? He met her eyes. Then you'll fail standing on your own feet. And I'll still be here. That night, Emma found them in the study. Sarah still holding the envelope. David quiet beside her. Are we staying over again? She asked sleepily. Sarah hesitated. David stood, walked over, and knelt beside her. Emma, he said gently, what if I told you? I'd like you and your mom to stay here for a little while, maybe longer. Emma's eyes lit up, like a sleepover that keeps going. He smiled, something like that. Emma looked at her mom, unsure. Sarah knelt too, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. I don't know if we'll stay forever, she said honestly, but I think we can stay long enough to see what home might feel like. Emma grinned and hugged them both, hard. This is my favorite day, she whispered. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep between them on the couch, watching a Christmas movie rerun, Sarah turned to David. I'm scared, she admitted again. He didn't try to fix it, didn't try to silence it. He just reached out and gently, carefully, took her hand. I am too, he said, but I want to be scared together. The greatest gifts don't arrive wrapped in bows. They arrive in the form of someone who sees your fear and stays anyway. Chapter 8. The day the snow stopped. It was the first day the snow didn't fall. For weeks, Chicago had been blanketed in white, every window at David's house framed like a postcard. Every morning, the world outside looked brand new. But that morning, it was just gray. Bare branches, salt-streaked streets, sidewalks thawing. Even the treehouse looked lonelier somehow. And David? He could feel it in his bones. The cold no longer came from the weather. It came from within. He didn't say anything at breakfast, just stirred his coffee twice, then left it untouched. Emma didn't notice she was busy cutting her waffles into hearts, but Sarah did. She watched him as he walked to the window. Slower than usual, a slight tremble in his hand, a stiffness in his step. He looked older. Today, he looked like someone trying not to be seen. That afternoon, Dr. Avery came by. David had scheduled the visit quietly. He didn't want Sarah or Emma to know, but secrets don't last long. In a house where love is learning how to breathe, Sarah found him in the study afterward, sitting in the leather chair Rachel once called the truth seat. She saw the redness in his eyes before he even looked up. What happened? He held out the paper lab results, charts, silent numbers. 3 months, he said. Maybe less. Sarah blinked slowly. She didn't cry. Not yet. But she sat down beside him, like her body had been hollowed out. I thought you were doing better. I wanted to be, he whispered. I wanted to stay. He looked at her, and the guilt in his eyes was worse than the diagnosis. I'm sorry. For what? For letting you believe this could be more than a chapter. She shook her head. No, she said. Don't do that. Don't start rewriting the story just because you know how it ends. He looked at her. Truly looked. And for a moment, neither spoke. Then she whispered, I'd rather have 3 honest months than a lifetime of pretending I don't need anyone. That night, he couldn't sleep. His body ached. His thoughts raced. He wandered the house like a ghost through the quiet halls, past Emma's art taped to the refrigerator, past Sarah's sweater draped on the armchair. He ended up in the treehouse. The floor creaked under his weight. He sat down, pulled the blanket Emma had left behind around his shoulders, and stared up at the stars. He had wanted to build an empire. Now, he just wanted time. Not more years. Just enough to finish the story, right? The next morning, Emma found him asleep there. Mr. David. He blinked awake, startled. Hey, sweetheart. She climbed up beside him, settling against his side, like she'd always belonged there. You look tired. I am. She looked up at him seriously. You should tell Mama. He nodded. I did. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I made you a map. A map. In case you get lost, she said. It shows how to get back to us. David's throat closed. He unfolded it with shaking hands. Crayon lines. A crooked path. 3 stick figures holding hands. A treehouse. A heart. And at the bottom, written in wobbly pink, home. Later that evening, Sarah sat beside him by the fire. The television was off. The world was quiet. She took his hand, warm and thin in hers. We'll make it count, she said softly. David nodded. I'm not afraid of dying, he whispered. She looked at him, eyes brimming. Then what are you afraid of? Leaving you before you believe you're worthy of being loved forever. She pressed his hand to her cheek. You already did. When the snow stops, we see what was underneath all along the bare truth. The quiet ache, the fierce roots of love that never needed a fairy tale to survive. Chapter 9. Say it like you mean forever. David had never been a man who asked for much. He negotiated contracts, built billion-dollar buildings, convinced senators and CEOs to follow his lead. But asking for love, that had always felt impossible. Until now, until Sarah, until Emma, until the house that once echoed with silence now smelled like soup and crayons and home. The day he made the decision, he woke before sunrise, not from pain, not from nightmares, but from something deeper. The ache of wanting to matter, not in headlines, but in memory. He walked to the kitchen, wrapped in a sweater Sarah had left on the chair, and stared out at the garden. Snow was melting. The world was changing again. So was he. Later that morning, Sarah found him at the dining table. Papers spread out before him. At first, she thought they were medical records. Then she saw the heading, Petition for Legal Guardianship and Adoption. She froze. David, what is this? He looked up, eyes gentle. I want to adopt Emma. Her breath caught. What? I know I'm dying, he said quietly. I know I won't walk her down the aisle, or see her graduate, or drive her to her first job." He swallowed hard, but I want her to know that someone in this world chose her, that she was wanted, not out of responsibility, not out of pity, but out of love. Sarah's voice cracked. "You don't have to do this to prove anything." "I'm not doing it to prove something," he whispered. "I'm doing it because she already feels like my daughter." Silence wrapped around them, not cold, just still. Then Sarah sat down beside him. "She already calls this place home," she said. "She already talks about you, like you're hers." David smiled softly. "And what about you?" Her eyes met his. "No walls, no armor. I stopped pretending I didn't love you weeks ago." He reached for her hand, the same one that had held him steady through illness, change, and all the fragile moments in between. "Marry me," he said. Sarah blinked. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated. "Not out of obligation, not for paperwork, but because I want you to have my name. I want to give you what time I have left as yours, fully, officially, forever." Tears slipped down her cheek. "I don't need a ring to love you." "I know," he said, "but I need to say it out loud. I need to hear you say it out loud." Sarah kissed his knuckles and nodded. "Okay," she whispered, "then say it like you mean forever." 3 weeks later, on a crisp February morning, they stood in the garden beneath a white arch Emma had decorated with hand-cut paper hearts. There was no crowd, no photographers, just them and Judge Walker, a friend of David's who came not out of duty, but belief. Sarah wore a pale blue dress borrowed from Rachel's closet. Emma wore pink rain boots and held both their hands. David stood tall, pale but beaming, his eyes locked on the two souls who had made the last months of his life feel like they were his first. "I never thought I'd find love after loss," he said in his vows. "I never thought I deserved a second chance." He looked at Sarah, then at Emma, but then two girls knocked on the window of a restaurant and gave me something I thought I'd buried with my past. He turned to Emma. "And you, little one, you made me a father before I even knew I needed to be one." Emma smiled, missing one front tooth. "They said I do in the garden, hands entwined, promises spoken with tears and steady breath." Then they walked inside, where a second document waited on the kitchen table, the adoption form. Emma stood on her tiptoes to sign her name beside David's. "Are you sure?" the judge asked gently. Emma looked up at David, her hand wrapped in his. "He's always been my daddy," she said. "Now it's just legal." David laughed, the sound small and tired, but full of joy. He kissed her forehead. "Forever now," he whispered. That night, as they curled together on the couch, David read from The Secret Garden. Emma fell asleep first. Sarah curled beside him, head on his shoulder. "Say it again," she whispered. He looked down at her, heart wide open. "I love you," he said, "and I'm not afraid anymore. We can't choose how long we have, but we can choose who we belong to." And sometimes saying forever is just a way of saying, "I will love you, even after I'm gone." Chapter 10. The letters he left behind. The first letter arrived on a Thursday. It came in a pale blue envelope, slid beneath the door like a whisper. Sarah recognized the handwriting instantly. Emma found it. She held it like it might melt in her hands. "Mammy," she whispered. "It's from Daddy." Sarah took it slowly. She wasn't ready, but she opened it anyway. The paper trembled in her fingers. "My girls, if you're reading this, it means I've slipped out of the room quietly, just like I always promised I would. But I didn't leave empty-handed. I took every laugh, every sleepy goodnight, every snowball fight, and quiet Sunday with me. Thank you for giving me something I never thought I'd feel again home. Sarah, I loved you in a way I didn't think I'd ever love again. Not because you needed saving, but because you didn't. You stood beside me, not behind me. You were not my second chapter. You were the story I never knew. I'd waited my whole life to begin. Emma, my little girl, the day you asked me to have dinner with you, you saved my life. That night, I had no plans, no hope, just cold food and a quiet exit. But you brought crayons. You brought color. You brought me back. I've left you both letters for the days I won't be there. Birthdays, graduations, the day you fall in love, and the day your heart breaks. Open them when you're ready, or not at all. You'll know when. I don't want you to remember the hospital, or the way I got tired. Remember the pancakes, the bad ones, the crunchy ones. Remember the treehouse, the snow angels, the firelight. Remember us, because love, real love, doesn't end. It just changes shape. I'll see you in the sun. Dad, Sarah pressed the letter to her chest. Emma crawled into her lap, holding her mother's hand and staring into the silence like she was trying to see her father's face in it. I miss his voice, she whispered. Sarah nodded, holding back her tears. Me too. Over the next few weeks, more letters came, each carefully marked, each filled with stories, inside jokes, and gentle advice. One for Emma's first lost tooth. One for the first time Sarah felt lonely in the kitchen. One labeled, "Open when it snows again." Sarah opened that one alone. The following December, inside was a single sentence. Go outside. She's waiting for you by the treehouse. She put on her coat, stepped into the falling snow. Emma was there, coat zipped to her chin, mittens covered in frost, smiling through the cold. Want to build a dragon? She asked. Sarah laughed. Yes, I think we should. The clinic opened that spring. Sarah cut the ribbon with Emma at her side, wearing the same pink rain boots from the wedding. The sign out front read, "The Mitchell Wellness Center for Children, where every heart deserves a place to be young." Years passed. Emma grew. She read her father's letters every birthday, and every time she felt scared or small or unsure, they never stopped meaning something. Because his voice had stayed, because his love had lasted exactly as he'd promised. Not in years, but in forever. And on the day Emma left for college, a small envelope sat on her pillow. The handwriting, still steady. Dear Emma, today I'm proud, not just because you're smart or kind or strong, but because you've become the kind of woman who makes people feel safe. The world is going to ask you to forget who you are. Don't. You are the girl who saved a man's life by asking him to have dinner. You are the daughter of resilience, of warmth, of snow and pancakes and Sunday night movies. And wherever you go, take us with you. I'll be in every letter you write, in every window you pass on a snowy night. I'm with you, always. Dad, Emma cried, but not from sadness, from knowing, because some stories don't end. They echo, they ripple, they become the maps we hand to others when they're lost. And long after the world stopped calling him a billionaire, long after his name faded from plaques and portfolios, he was still alive, in her, in Sarah, in every child that walked into the clinic with broken shoes and trembling hope, and in every little girl who looked through a restaurant window and found home waiting on the other side. He didn't leave them rich in gold, but in the kind of love that wraps around you on your darkest night. The kind that says, you are seen, you are chosen, you are mine. And maybe that's what forever really means. Some love stories are written in ink. This one was written in snow, and though the snow eventually melted, the memory of it never did. Emma Mitchell would grow up remembering the feel of her father's coat against her cheek. She would remember the way his voice softened when he read bedtime stories. She would remember the sound of his laugh in the kitchen, trying to flip pancakes that never quite looked like pancakes. She would remember the day the richest man in the city said, "You don't need to earn love, you just need to believe in it." And Sarah, She would remember the man who held her pain without trying to fix it, who saw her not as someone broken, but as someone becoming, who loved her not with perfection, but with presence. David Mitchell didn't live forever, but he gave his forever to them, and that was more than enough. There are still days Emma walks past restaurant windows and looks for someone sitting alone, and when she sees them, she smiles, because once, a very long time ago, she reached through the glass and saved a stranger with 7 simple words. Would you like to have dinner with us? And that stranger became family. If this story moved you, the next one goes even deeper. Somewhere out there, another ordinary woman is about to change the life of someone no one thought could be saved. And maybe that someone is you. See you in the next story. We'd love to hear from you. What did this story make you feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments and rate it between 0 and 10. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you're always updated. More inspiring stories are waiting. Click here to watch them.